everybody, and welcome to our first WomenEd event for the Mercian Trust. The aim of today's session is really to introduce you to WomenEd, its aims and the reason it exists, and also to launch our suite of WomenEd events, which will be running across the Trust as part of our MAT CPD offer. As part of our trust, we have several staff who work within WomenEd. So Amy Whittle, one of our new directors of school development, is a regional leader for the West Midlands, and I also hold the same title as well. But if you want a real expert on WomenEd, it would be best for us to speak to one of the founding members and the global strategic lead for WomenEd, who also happens to be a head teacher of Q3 Tipton at the side of that, Keziah Featherstone. So thanks for joining us today, Keziah. Could you tell us a little bit about what WomenEd is, please?
WomenEd is an organisation that aims to support and promote either current or aspirant women leaders within education. And it really is that vague, it's that wide. Within that, that includes people that are about to start training. It includes people that have sort of just retired. We have some he for she advocates, which is wonderful because you can't change the world by yourself. And basically, we are a very, very broad organisation with that overall aim of supporting women who are currently leaders or want to be leaders within education.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. So why did you choose personally to get involved in this movement, then, Keziah?
Probably about 8 years ago, there was some research published into the gender pay gap in education. Particularly concerning to us was disproportionately there are more women that work in schools, there's more women that work in education, both in teaching and in associate support staff roles, and yet role for role there is a massive gap. And really for a sector like education, which should be about equality and diversity and embracing difference and enabling people, we were absolutely shocked by that. So we started talking about this or writing about it and blogging about it using a platform that existed at the time called Staffroom, which no longer exists, but we were publishing it on Twitter. And from that, a group of us said, well, shall we meet and talk about this a little bit more and see if there's something that we can do that's a little bit more organised. At the time, we didn't feel the unions were doing an awful lot about it. No one seemed to sort of want to do anything about it apart from moan. And there's a lot of moaning to be done. So about 4 or 5 of us met up for sort of it was very middle class. It was an afternoon tea at a random hotel just off the M25 because we'd never met in person before. We decided that we wanted to do something about it. We would start this organisation. We thought it'd probably just be us. We said, should we do a little conference, get people together and talk about it? And that's what we did in the October. And probably just over 100 people came to it, which was fantastic. We sold out, and from there it's snowballed unbelievably. So I chose to get involved in it because I thought things were unfair. Things were really unfair, and when you're looking at a recruitment retention crisis at a sector that is predominantly female, you can't be essentially oppressing the vast majority of your workforce. Unfortunately, it's got worse since we started. The gap's become worse. At one point, education was, I think, the third worst gender pay gap in the UK. We were worse than the construction industry, and we've got worse. It's widened over the last few years. So that's why I'm still in it.
Yeah, good. So definitely a moral purpose there to the work that you're undertaking. And all of this is voluntary alongside your role, is it?
Yes. The full-time is, I know, it's bonkers. The full-time I've been doing this, I've also been a head teacher in Bristol, now I'm a head teacher at Q3 Academy Tipton. Everybody else does it on a completely voluntary basis alongside their full-time job. Some of us are still leaders within schools. Some of us, one of us is over in Canada, one's in Switzerland. Some of us have changed roles a few times. Vivian's almost retired. but she still keeps working in lots of different sectors. So yes, we're all still volunteers. We claim no money from it, from the organisation itself, or from anything like book sales, or from any of the events. Not a penny has come my way. In fact, I'm out of pocket, so my gender pay gap has got bigger.
But actually, what you've spoken about there is that the cause is kind of spurring people on who are involved in this as a movement, and that want
Absolutely.
for change. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to do things better than you found them, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Great, that's brilliant. So could you talk to us a little bit about, so I've read about these 8 C's of WomenEd. I'm going to challenge you now to name them all if you can, but could you talk to us?
I'll be honest, I probably wouldn't be able to do it off the top of my head. I think when we were establishing the group, more and more people wanted to become involved. And I suppose we were a little bit concerned that people go, well, I'm going to take this logo and I'm going to use it for influence and money, essentially, to make myself look better. And there are a couple of instances quite early on where quite unpleasant, I would almost say misogynistic organisations said, well, tell you what, we'll pay for your creche at one of these, or we'll pay for your afternoon cake and coffee. Can we use your logo? And I think a few inexperienced and quite innocent people said, yeah, that'd be great, because you want some money, you want some support. And then our logo, our name was being attached to quite unpleasant organisations. I won't go into any details. I do have a history of getting myself into trouble with these things. So we wanted to make it really clear right from the beginning that we had absolute unnegotiable or non-negotiable values. And we talk about the 8 C's. So we talk about collaboration, we talk about community. And the community is the most important one. We talk about collaboration, all these 8 C's. I'm sure you can insert a slide at some point. And what it does is it allows us to organise ourselves around those values. And I suppose that's what any organisation does. Any of your schools will have a motto, it will have a set of values, it will have a vision that it wants to stay true to, and everything comes back to it. And it means that actually when something new comes on board and we are valuing whether we should do it or not, evaluating whether we should do it or not, is okay, does it meet our values? Does it meet one of the 8 C's? And if it doesn't, then why are we doing it? If someone comes to us with something and says, do you want to do this? And it's really just about making money, no, we don't want to do it. But if it's about community, if it's about collaboration, if it's about just anything that is about the values of WomenEd, then we will explore it further. And sometimes we don't go any further with it. So there was an organisation a little while ago that said, I'd love to do some sort of work with you. I'd like to. We can pay to put on all these presentations. We will say that we're doing it. We'll invite the WomenEd community. We'll say that we're doing it to develop women leaders. And then when you go behind the scenes and you look at their own gender pay gap, actually they've got a board of directors that are all men. They're not living the values. Therefore, we've learned over time, and particularly since we established those core 8 C's, we've made sure that we keep coming back to them over and over again, so we don't lose our way and we don't lose our purpose. Because it would be very easy to do. We could become like Coke, maybe, or I don't know, KFC or something, where it just kind of goes crazy. Which would be lovely, but actually, is this the right thing to do?
And it's so important to be principled in that as well, isn't it? Because sometimes the cause itself can distort, or the message can be distorted. So, if you've got a framework to work towards, that really gives you some clarity as an organisation, doesn't it? And, and a really clear way forward. It's okay.
Welcome to the lovely bells at Keziah Tipton. Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is something that we've had to be very disciplined about, and I think it's something that in roles in schools, I think as leaders you have to be quite disciplined about. Why are we doing this? What is the purpose of it? If it's going to take money, if it's going to take time, why are we doing it? Is it just a glory project? Is it something that's going to satisfy one person's need to sort of explore something they're interested in, or actually is it something really important?
Yeah. And it's about being judicious with your energies as well. You know, all of the people that you've described as part of the organisation are going to be very busy, probably lead very busy personal lives as well as professional lives. It's important to be judicious about where you put your energies and making sure that that has the impact that you want it to, doesn't it? Brilliant.
Absolutely. I mean, my day job is as a head teacher, and that's got to have my priority, and then I've got a family, and then there's WomenEd. I mean, there's probably a couple of other things as well, cake and stuff. But the WomenEd is there. It's not the dominant factor in what influences that time.
Yeah, great, brilliant. Okay, so you've spoken a little bit about the gender pay gap as being one of the things that WomenEd are aiming to sort of change and see some sort of revolution with. How else does WomenEd attempt to kind of change this working landscape for female leaders?
I think we have campaigned quite rigorously on a number of issues. So we've campaigned extensively on flexible working, particularly for women returning to the workplace after maternity leave or adoption leave or carers leave, and the want to go back into leadership roles, and not the number of heads I'm aware of saying, well, yes, you can have your flexible working request, but you've got to give up your TLR, or I think that's abhorrent. I think that's appalling, and I think somebody coming back and leading, continuing to lead on 2 or 3 days a week is, in certain roles, absolutely appropriate. I also reserve judgment as a head teacher to say, occasionally this is a role I kind of think you need to be here all the time for, but actually it was a default at one point that if you were coming back after maternity leave and you were a leader, TLR holder, or in senior leadership, you could not continue in that role if you wanted to go part-time. And I think that's appalling. So we've done an awful lot of work around that. Got a lot of case studies. We've met with a lot of people in the DFE, and we've started to be able to work with both the NAHT and also ASCL, who have picked up this cause for us, really, and have started to make it a much more widely recognised campaign and something that's really important. So we've continued to do that, and I think that's really important. I think we've continued to have our networking activities, organised, sort of, whether it's an in-face sort of conference or unconference. We call them unconferences because a conference suggests that somebody speaking is the expert and everybody else needs to just go and learn, whereas an unconference is like everybody, we're all the same. Let's just learn one another. So that's where the word unconference originally came from. We all learn from one another. It's all very equal. So we're continuing to do that, and obviously we just had let me just turn off my Outlook, otherwise you're going to get loads of pings, because obviously it's so important and people like to send me emails. So we continue to do that. So we have the Global Unconference, and what's nice about that is, although we can't see one another in person, people from all over the world can contribute. So when I was hosting, there was somebody from Australia, and there was also someone from Birmingham. So people were sort of getting involved and listening to one another and talking, but all of those recorded, and they're put on the WomenEd YouTube site, so people go and listen to whatever they want in order to have a look. We've got 2 books, and that enables people to read, and a lot of people have come to us because someone's given them a copy of the book, someone, and sharing those stories. And I think that's what's been most powerful about WomenEd and about changing that working landscape, is that a lot of people say, but I don't feel quite so lonely anymore. I don't feel like I'm the only person. I think when we did our first face-to-face conference many years ago now, one of my sort of my good friends, Aisha Small, she's at that time, I think she's out of education now, sadly. At that time, she was a young black female leader at school in London, and she said, it's the first place I've ever come, and I haven't felt like the token face in a sea of white men. She was a math teacher, and it was just like, it couldn't be this way. So we've another one of our campaign is about the diversity of school leadership, regardless of gender or sexuality or age or race or religion. And I mean, I am mindful people still talk about the glass ceiling for white women, but I think if you're a woman of colour, it is a concrete ceiling. Just get there's so few women of colour in headships that almost you can count them. In your palm. It's ridiculous, and I don't think that does our children any good. You can't be what you can't see, and we need people of all backgrounds as leaders in schools, as teachers in schools, as associate staff in schools. Otherwise, you're looking up and going, well, I'm a young black girl, and all the teachers or all the senior leaders in the school are white men.
Yeah.
What does that say about my place in education? That's how we are trying to change that working landscape for female leaders.
Yeah, it's not an overnight job, though, is it? It's not something that we can achieve quickly.
No, and I think the fact that the gap's getting bigger is
really
depressing. Some practical things we've done. We work with Ambition Institute on a WomenEd cohort for MPQH for women that want to do MPQH but didn't necessarily want to do it in a room full of men. Absolutely fine if you want to do it in a room full of men, but actually there's an awful lot of people that didn't. And we're now working with the National College to put on additional sort of master's courses around educational leadership in order to benefit and improve on that. So lots of things that we're doing at the moment in order to improve.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, that sounds really, really good. So talk to us a little bit about, I suppose you've touched on this in what you've just explained, but on an individual level, an organisation level, or I think you've spoken about the system more widely, what sort of actions do you think should be taken? What about the individual woman who's aspiring to middle leadership or senior leadership, but thinking, I can't do this, or I don't feel like I'm able to? What sort of actions do you think they should take?
I think we all owe it to the next generation to be their advocates and enable them to gain the experience and the wisdom, and also appreciate that when they go into leadership, they can do it regardless of family commitments or regardless of experience in some instances. And being good enough is being good enough. And to be a leader or a senior leader or a head teacher is not a checklist of very macho characteristics that you have to kind of subscribe to. When we were doing Google searches 8 years ago for head teacher, it was all white men. You now do a Google search for head teachers, it is a bit more diverse. There is a shift, but we need to make sure that you don't think, well, to be a head teacher, it has to be like this. If I want to be a young mum, it has to be like this. I got my first senior position the same year as I discovered I was carrying my daughter 15 years ago. The head said, I'd like you to apply for this job. And I said, well, are you mad? I'm about to go off on maternity leave. And he was like, no, you're the right person for the job. And you have to pay that forward and you have to pay that backwards. So it's not that long ago that a trainee teacher at my school was saying, well, and she was pregnant, and she was like, do you think I'll pick up any jobs for January? And it was like, well, why aren't you applying for September jobs? You can pick up a job for September, but start it on maternity leave. And then when you're ready to come back, you're ready to come back. We ended up giving her that position. And she hadn't thought of it. She thought she'd basically be without work for a term. And so we have to make sure that we're having that dialogue and we're living those values. And I try very hard. If you're a leader in your school, whether you're male or female, you have to present those values that make leadership palatable to somebody that is also trying to run a life. The biggest demographic that we're hemorrhaging from schools are women in their 30s, between 30 and 39. It's women that are starting families, and then the environment in the school is not appropriate for them to come back. They're not coming back. We're losing thousands of them in their 30s, and they're not returning. I had a colleague who was a drama teacher. She went off on maternity leave. They didn't want her to return under particular conditions, and since then she's been working for the library service. She was a cracking teacher. We've lost that. our children have lost that resource, that person, that advocate for them. It's absolutely appalling. So, it's absolutely fine. I will try and do this as much as possible when I will stand up in front of the staff and I'll say, look, today we've got this meeting after school. Tomorrow we haven't got any meetings, but please be mindful. I will be leaving at 3:30 because I've got to take the daughter home. So I make it very, very clear that I am juggling the role of head teacher with the role of mum and other things as well when I need to, because it normalises it rather than that presenteeism. I've got to be here until literally the caretaker kicks me out, and I have to behave in a particular way as a leader because I think that's what is expected of me. So it's about everybody as individuals being properly authentic and true to who they are, rather than thinking, well, I've got to pretend I've got to be a different kind of leader because I think that's what's expected of me.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about everybody contributing to that as well. I've worked in organisations before when people's leaving time has been clocked as if to say, well, they don't work very hard as a teacher because they're out the door by 4:45 or whatever, but they've got young children to collect, and people don't know that person might well be carrying on work or might not be, in the evenings. But like you say, I think sometimes this kind of being a slave to the job is glorified, and again, when you become a mother, or if you've got other commitments, suddenly it becomes very difficult to squeeze those things in, and you don't see people in your organisation who are like you, or at least open enough to say, this is how I balance being a mum and being a teacher or having a career. So I think you're right. We do absolutely have a responsibility to each other to stop glorifying this idea of wanting to be the last car on the car park at school at night, because it's not healthy for anybody.
No, it's bonkers. It absolutely drains you, and it stops you wanting to do anything. And I think as long as you get the work done, it's fine. And I mean, you've got to be honest. You don't come into teaching for a rest, do you? It's pretty full on, and it's there's certain aspects of the job that are never going to go away. You've got to plan your lessons. You've got to teach your lessons. Sometimes kids won't be very nice to you, and you've got to give them feedback in order to help them improve. That is never going away, and that takes an awful lot of time. I think it's the stuff around it, is the periphery around it that we can do something about.
Yeah.
And I think at an organisational level, and Dan knows that I harass him about a number of things, and we'll continue to work on that. But there are some things that continue to happen that I don't think should happen. I don't think putting your current salary on a job application should be there, because I think it indexes a gender pay gap. Because if somebody is on this amount of money and then they apply for this amount, and when you go, well, maybe they're applying for too big a jump, or well, that's often a little bit less. And so it's something that I think we can do with. And I am aware, not within Mercian, thank heavens, but I am still hearing of women going to interview and being asked when they're going to start a family. That's illegal. To be honest, some schools have got wise to it, and they get the strange old governor to ask those questions. Still illegal. It's absolutely nothing to do with anybody, and yet it's still being asked in some places. It's shocking. And somebody said, well, what do I do when they ask me that? I say, well, you tell them it's none of your business. If they don't give you the job, you probably really luckily let off the hook. And do you really want to work there? And I think the thing about a recruitment and retention crisis, and I probably shouldn't be saying this as a head, is you can be picky. You don't have to go to a school. You don't have to pretend to be somebody different to get that promotion or to get that role, because there are so many schools and so many roles out there. You can afford to be picky. So pick somewhere where you think you're going to be treated well. I think that's so important.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, as we've alluded to previous to this, on a personal or individual level, connecting with these sorts of networks that give you an outlet to see whether your experience is in line with what's expected or what should be happening. So I think so many women go through experiences like those questions at interview that you've just spoken about, but won't ever talk about that because they'd have thought that that's the normal thing to ask or the normal way to be. And so, yeah, there's real power in these networks of working out, is that what's supposed to happen or not? See, it's very easy to question yourself rather than the system, isn't it? A lot of the time.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. So talk to us, we've spoken about perhaps some of the things that could change at systematic and systemic level. What sort of good practice have you heard about, which has kind of helped to overcome some of these barriers that we've spoken about?
I think we've been lucky in the sense that we've been quite influential with a number of head teachers and CEOs that have adapted their HR policies in order to remove some of the barriers. And some of the policies that have been brought in have been reviewing the flexible working request to make sure that there's nothing in there that is particularly penalising of women. We've worked with lots of heads and CEOs to put in place menopause policies of a woman of a certain age. I can absolutely attest to the need for that. If you do go a little bit bonkers for a while, it's not very pleasant, and actually having a policy in place can support with it. So some really good sort of adaptations to HR policies are important, I think, and something that can be put into place by anybody really. It takes a bit of work, takes a bit of time, but it's important. I think having really strong practices around women that are returning to the workplace after a gap, particularly maternity, adoption leave. You might come back after 3 or 4 months, you might come back after 12 months. People think, well, they used to work at the school, nothing much has changed. I haven't spoken to a woman or a man that has taken a substantial amount of time off. Long-term illness as well. There's all sorts of reasons somebody's away from the workplace for a period of time. But it is a completely different place when you come back. Sometimes people have sort of forgotten about you. The kids might have forgotten who you are. Your colleagues. I remember, I only took 4 months with my daughter, but I came back and, I didn't know some of the staff in my own department, and they didn't know really who I was. And it just felt different. And I spoke to a colleague who I worked with at a different school. She took a year off and she came back and no one spoke to her. Her friends, some of her closest friends at the school had moved on. Some of the others were like, well, I haven't seen you for a year. It's about trying to make those people not feel let out. Is it worthwhile sending them an invitation to the Christmas party? Or, remembering when it's their birthday? How do you continue to make somebody feel part of the team? And you can talk about that as a leadership team and think, what is within our capacity to do to make sure these people continue to feel that they're part of our team? So, little things like that, really.
Yeah, I just picking up on what you've just said. I think there's, whenever you've been out of school for a long period of time, you can also suddenly appreciate how the students feel when they come back and they've been poorly. And we always say, don't we, make them feel welcome and make them feel like as though they've been missed. If you've been out of school for a period of time and have battled with serious illness, or if you've got or else, your identity changes. Your identity is that you've paid attention. It's not just something that you do, it's who you are. And sometimes that knowledge, I think, that you're a different person leaving or going off. You're missing a trick, really, aren't you?
And I think the other thing sometimes people do is they overcompensate. They assume that you don't want to be invited to the pub on a Friday because you've probably got some childcare. It's like, I'd really like to go and just talk to some adults for an hour, rather than sort of like the kids in my classroom and then going home and doing the tea and stuff. So it's about finding a really nice balance and just talking to somebody, saying, like, what do you want to be the same? What do you want to be different? And it's just taking that time out to treat people as individuals, and then just supporting everybody's professional development. I think, we got into a couple of years ago, and I've got to be honest, I don't know if we've sorted that out yet, the apprenticeship levy that we could dip into to support, pay for some of the MPQs, but we couldn't do it for people that were on main scale or UPS, because technically they're classed as part-time workers. and it was only people on the leadership scale that are classed as full-time workers. Obviously, the contract is different. I mean, if you're main scale or UPS, you feel like you're full-time, don't you? And you lead, and we couldn't use the apprenticeship levy in order to pay for some of their professional development. Now, if you're in an area like Tipton, then all your MPQs are free. But there were some schools in more advantaged areas where they were like, well, that means I'm not getting the same opportunities as some of my senior colleagues, or the people that started in the same year as me, but because maybe they're men and they haven't taken maternity leave, or they have progressed, they're now able to access that pot, and I can't. And things like that just seem unfair. Well, they are unfair. They don't just seem unfair. They are unfair, and you've got to find ways around it. You just got to find here is a solution that we can use, and sort of just investing in it both in terms of money, but also people time, leadership time.
Yeah, brilliant. And the last thing you sort of about children being people represented or themselves represented in leadership teams or within their own staff body. Why is that so important? It's a bit of a no-brainer as a question, really, but why is that so important? And how do you see improvements being made? Is it more challenging than it seems on these things?
I think every single one of us has a responsibility to build a community in which everybody is valued, recognised and seen, and I think that starts at school level. That's why I think there should be a lot more men working in early years and primary school education. Why I think there should be a lot more people of colour, people who have English as an additional language, people with disabilities. Everybody should be seen, because otherwise children start to feel the otherness embeds in themselves very, very young, and they think, well, the adults in this school, these figures of authority, they're white and male, or they're white, or they're able-bodied, or have English as their first language. And I'm not like that. I don't see anybody that is an adult and a role model for me that I identify with. It doesn't matter whether they like them or not, but they recognise them and they see them. And I think that also matters for the parents. That, is there somebody there that I feel I can talk to that will understand my background and my culture? So I think that embakes quite early with that idea, particularly in early years, that is absolutely dominated by women, that women are these nurturing figures. And, women are nurturing, but men are nurturing too. Loads of us have great dads, and loads of men are fantastic in early years. Why aren't there more? Is it because they're paid less? Or it's that there's stigma around it, and you still see. I remember seeing a note put on Twitter, a written note from somebody's child's nursery saying, and the daughter was like 2, and she said, "Well, unfortunately, Paul had to change your daughter's nappy today. We apologise for this being a man." It's like, this is the 2020s.
Yeah.
And yes, a man at nursery can change a girl's nappy without there being any kind of impropriety. It's appalling. So yes, at all levels of leadership, at all levels of work, you need to see people that they can identify with, because you need the next generation. Britain is a very diverse community, and the West Midlands is even more so. I'm lucky. I think we have that at Tipton. But that's, I inherited a lot of that. So it's not like necessarily by design, but I think regardless of who you are as a child here, there is an adult that probably looks like you, and who probably sounds like you, and that you can talk to. I think that is really important and powerful. And if we are going to get the next generation of teachers, and the next generation of leaders, everybody needs to be able to look up and think, that's something I can aspire to if I want to. And it's not going to mean that I don't have a home life, and it doesn't mean that my family falls apart, and it doesn't mean that I make myself ill working every hour that is sent to me. That we can do it in a really ethical and meaningful way, and we can create the schools that our children need to be really successful. Now, it doesn't mean it's dead easy, it's hard, but I think that's important, and I think it's worth fighting for. And I think it's worth, you find your tribe, don't you? We've just got to continue to fight to find our tribe and make sure that we value it when we find it and stick with it. I know lots of people. I've got a friend down in Essex who is right on the London border. He's just outside of the extra pay rating. The number of people he leaves for promotion into London, most of them come back within 2 years. And they take a demotion, they take a pay cut to come back because they go over the border. I'm not saying every school in London is really nefarious, but they go over the border and they're just not treated as nicely.
Yeah.
They're not valued. It's almost like a machine, and it's like I want to come back. And ultimately, I think what the pandemic's proven in the entire world of work, whether we are looking at baristas or whether we're looking at CEOs, is that actually quality of life, enjoying life, being happy is far more important than money and possessions and material things. Because when things go wrong, it doesn't matter what car you're driving.
No.
And it doesn't matter what office you're sitting in, because you're probably sat at home, aren't you, trying to log on to Wi-Fi or something. So I think the world of work has changed, and I think it will take a little. Either people are going to work very, very hard to get it back to where it was, or we can work really hard the other way to go. It's time to look at things in a different way.
Absolutely. So just before we finish today then, Keziah, could you tell us how people can get involved in WomenEd if they want to find out more about the organisation or get involved in some of our events? What can they do?
The biggest place is Twitter. If you don't like Twitter, some of it's a little bit weird, but get yourself onto Twitter, and we're on Twitter as @WomenEd. It's that simple. We also have a Facebook page where you can get involved. We've got an Instagram, we've got the YouTube. We're on all the socials. We're very modern. I don't think we've done TikTok yet. You don't want me dancing on TikTok. I've got to be honest. I'm quite old. I don't understand TikTok. So that's to one side. The newsletter, you can sign up for the newsletter. We've got a website. There are blogs going on there every single week. People in either education, sometimes not in education, mostly women, but not only women, are writing blogs, and we're publishing them. So read some of those. We've got the 2 books, which are lots of very short, pithy chapters about people sharing their experiences and the lessons they've learned from it and things that you can take from it. All the face-to-face and online events that you can get involved at are on the website. We also promote them on Twitter. They'll also go on the Facebook side. They'll go in the newsletter. We are out there. Just go and look for us, and it's not a problem. If you're like, well, I don't do any of that, drop me an email at Q3Tipton, and I will get you signed up and help you out with that. It's too important not to do, and sometimes it's like, there's so much to do at my school. There's so much to do, but I love it. But sometimes that makes WomenEd quite. It's like, oh my god, I've got to do something. It's like this weekend. It's like I've got to be online for 4 days. But afterwards, it's so invigorating. You think, I'm not alone. There are people out there. I've learned something. The world is becoming a better place. If I'm not in the right place, I think I can find someone to help me to get to a right place. WomenEd will help you with letters of application. WomenEd will help you with interview practice. WomenEd will help you with the sorts of questions, and also, not the answers, because we don't want to. It's not cheating. You've got to be authentic when you give your answers. But if somebody asks you a question that you don't want to answer, we can help you with your stop response. So when someone says, when you're having a baby, you don't just go because it's quite shocking the first time it happens. You don't know quite what to say. Hopefully it won't happen to anybody, and it shouldn't happen to anybody. But sometimes you just think, what is that about? And therefore we're here to support with everything. So drop me a line if you can't find us any other way.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for your time this afternoon, Keziah. So as part of the training, Keziah's just mentioned, there is a chapter from the book here, which is 10% Braver. And that's been emailed to you if you subscribe to today's training session. Please read that, and then you can complete your registration form afterwards for today's session. As Keziah alluded to just now, there are plenty of ways in which you can get involved in WomenEd. We are looking as a trust to start putting on WomenEd events as part of our kind of regional West Midlands work as well. And it would be great to see as many of you there and represented as possible. We're going to do another video in this series. So the next one is going to feature our regional leader, Amy Whittle, who's going to be talking about some of the key challenges that have been faced by women entering leadership roles at various levels. So thank you so much for your time, Keziah. I've really enjoyed talking to you today, and hopefully the rest of you have got lots out of this. We'll see you soon. Thank you.